There is a kind of person who walks into a room and doesn't chase anyone, doesn't beg for attention, doesn't perform, and somehow everyone still turns to look. You've felt it before. Maybe you've even wondered what it is exactly that makes some people impossible to forget while others are forgotten the moment they leave. It isn't luck. It isn't even beauty. Not really. It's something quieter, something that lives underneath the surface, a kind of psychological gravity. And today, we're going to break that gravity down piece by piece so you understand exactly what creates it, why it works on a biological and emotional level, and how you can build it in your own life without pretending to be someone you're not. This isn't about tricks. This isn't about playing games. This is about understanding how human desire actually works. What draws people in, what makes them stay, and what makes them crave your presence the way they crave something they can't quite explain. Stick with me until the end, because there's one psychological pattern I'm going to reveal later in this video that most people get completely backwards. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it in every relationship around you. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Most people spend their whole lives trying to be more available, more agreeable, more easy to love, thinking that if they just give enough, prove enough, show up enough, the affection will follow. But desire doesn't work like that. Desire isn't built on abundance. It's built on absence. Psychologists have studied this for decades, and the pattern is almost eerily consistent. Human beings don't crave what is constantly available to them. We crave what feels slightly out of reach. Think about anything you've ever wanted badly in your life. A job you almost didn't get. A friendship that took time to earn. A goal that made you sweat before it made you proud. The things that came easy rarely stayed valuable in your mind. The things that made you wait, made you wonder, made you work a little, those are the things that lodged themselves permanently into your psychology. And this is exactly where we're going to begin. But before we go further, I need you to remember this one idea, because in about a minute, everything is going to shift. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss the moment this entire video pivots into something you didn't expect. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. The moment you become fully predictable to another person, the moment they know exactly what you'll say, exactly how you'll react, exactly how much of yourself you're willing to give without asking for anything back. Something quietly dies in their mind. Not because they stop caring, but because the brain stops paying attention to things it has already fully mapped out. This is called habituation, and it's one of the most powerful, least talked about forces in human attraction. Our brains are wired to notice change, contrast, and unpredictability. A steady, unchanging signal, even a warm, loving one, eventually fades into background noise, the same way you stop hearing a fan running in a room after enough time passes. It's still there. It's still working. But your brain has filed it under already known and moved on to scanning for what's new. This is why so many people who give everything, who love the hardest, who show up the most consistently, are often the ones left wondering why their effort didn't translate into desire. It's not because they weren't loving enough. It's because they became too easy to predict, and the brain of the person they were pouring into slowly, quietly stopped reacting. Now here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part I promised you. The people who create the deepest, most magnetic pull in someone else's mind are not the ones who give the least. They're not playing hard to get in some shallow, manipulative sense. What they're actually doing, often without even realizing it, is staying emotionally whole on their own. They have a life. They have moods that aren't always about the other person. They have opinions they won't abandon just to keep the peace. They have standards, and they don't collapse those standards the moment someone shows interest. This creates something psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, a pattern where affection, attention, and warmth aren't given on a fixed, predictable schedule, but ebb and flow naturally, the way a real complex human being actually behaves. And here's the wild part. Intermittent reinforcement doesn't just maintain interest. Studies on behavioral conditioning, going all the way back to BF. Skinner's research on reward patterns show that unpredictable rewards create far stronger, more persistent craving than constant, guaranteed rewards. This is the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive, not because the payout is huge, but because you never know exactly when it's coming. Your brain stays hooked, checking, wondering, hoping. That is not manipulation when it happens naturally in a healthy dynamic. It's simply what happens when a person refuses to make themselves fully knowable, fully available, fully certain, all the time. Let's slow down here, though, because I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. This isn't about withholding love as a strategy. It isn't about playing cold or distant to manufacture desire artificially. That approach might work for a moment, but it collapses fast because people can feel the difference between authentic unpredictability and calculated coldness. What we're really talking about is something much deeper. The psychology of a person who has their own internal world, their own sense of identity, their own reasons for existing that have nothing to do with being chosen by somebody else. That is the actual source of magnetism, not the mystery itself, but what the mystery is built on. A person who isn't performing for approval, who isn't shaping themselves entirely around what someone else wants, who has a center of gravity inside their own life instead of orbiting somebody else's. Think about the people you've admired most in your life, not necessarily romantically, but in any context. A teacher who didn't need your approval to keep teaching with passion. A friend who had their own dreams they were chasing, regardless of who showed up to support them. There's a quiet confidence in people like that, and confidence, real confidence, not the performed kind, not the loud kind, is one of the most consistently attractive traits across every psychological study on interpersonal attraction ever conducted. But confidence isn't loudness, it isn't bragging, it isn't dominating a conversation. Real confidence is calm. It's the kind of energy that doesn't need to convince anyone of anything, because it isn't asking for permission to exist as it is. Now let's talk about something that trips almost everyone up: the difference between chasing and inviting. When you chase someone, texting first every time, rearranging your schedule around their availability, constantly initiating, constantly checking in, constantly trying to prove your value through effort, you are, without meaning to, communicating something to their subconscious mind. You're telling them, silently, that your sense of worth depends on their response. And the human brain is incredibly good at detecting that kind of dependency, even when it's never said out loud. It shows up in your tone, your timing, your body language, the way you write a message, and immediately wonder if it was too much or too little. People can feel that anxious undertone, even when they can't name it, and on some subconscious level, it makes them pull back. Not because they don't like you, but because dependency, even sweet and well-intentioned dependency, feels heavy. It feels like a responsibility instead of a joy. Inviting is different. Inviting means you show up as a full person, you express interest clearly and honestly, but you don't collapse your entire emotional state around whether or not that interest is returned in the exact moment or the exact way you hoped. Inviting says, I would love for you to be part of this life I'm building, instead of, please make me feel like I matter. That distinction might sound subtle, but psychologically, it's massive. One comes from abundance, the other comes from scarcity. And scarcity, ironically, is the very thing that pushes people away, even though scarcity thinking is often what convinces us to chase harder in the first place. Let's go even deeper into why this happens, because understanding the why is what will actually change your behavior, not just hearing the advice, but understanding the mechanism underneath it. Human beings, evolutionarily speaking, are wired to value things that require effort to obtain. This goes back further than modern relationships. It goes back to survival itself. Resources that were freely available in abundance were never as prized as resources that were scarce, competitive, or hard-won. Our brains carry that same wiring into emotional and romantic contexts, even in a world where survival no longer depends on it. When something is granted freely, instantly, and without any friction, the brain quietly downgrades its perceived value. Not because the thing itself is less valuable, but because the mind uses acquisition difficulty as a shortcut for worth. This is not cynicism, this is neuroscience. Researchers studying reward pathways in the brain have found that dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with craving, anticipation, and desire, spikes not at the moment of reward, but in the moments of uncertainty leading up to it. That means the craving itself, the wanting, is often more intense than the having. And if someone gives you everything immediately, with zero uncertainty, there's no space left for that dopamine-driven anticipation to build. This is why mystery isn't shallow or manipulative when it's built on authenticity. It's actually a form of respect. Respect for your own inner world, respect for the process of two people slowly discovering each other instead of dumping every detail onto the table in the first conversation. When you take your time revealing who you are, your dreams, your fears, your past, your quirks, you're not hiding. You're allowing curiosity to do what curiosity naturally does. Pull someone in layer by layer, keeping their mind engaged instead of satisfied and finished. A person who tells you everything about themselves in the first week gives your brain nothing left to wonder about. And a brain with nothing left to wonder about starts looking elsewhere for stimulation, even if it doesn't consciously mean to. There's another layer to this that almost nobody addresses directly, and it has to do with emotional self-sufficiency. People who create real lasting magnetism are the ones who have built a life so full, so rich with purpose, friendships, goals, hobbies, and self-respect that another person's presence becomes an addition to their happiness rather than the source of it. This might sound like a small distinction, but it changes everything about how you show up in a relationship. When your happiness depends on someone else's attention, you unconsciously communicate scarcity, a sense that you need them more than you want them. But when your happiness is already yours, already built, already stable, the energy you bring shifts entirely. You want someone rather than needing them, and wanting is magnetic. Needing, ironically, repels the very thing it's trying to hold on to. Let's talk about something practical here, something you can actually apply. Start by asking yourself honestly, if this person disappeared tomorrow, would your life still feel full? Not empty of them. Grief is natural. Missing someone is human, but structurally full. Do you have your own routines, your own passions, your own friendships that exist independently of this one connection? If the answer is no, that's not a flaw in your character. It's simply a sign of where the real work begins, and it has nothing to do with changing how you text back or how long you wait to reply. It has to do with building an identity so solid that your presence in someone's life feels like a gift you're choosing to give, not a need you're desperately trying to fill. Another piece of this puzzle is emotional consistency without predictability. And yes, that sounds contradictory, but it isn't. Emotional consistency means the person can trust your character. They know you're not going to explode over small things, that your moods aren't going to whiplash them unfairly, that your word means something. Predictability, on the other hand, refers to routine, to constantly knowing what you'll do next, when you'll text, how available you'll be. You want to be emotionally consistent, reliable in character, while remaining unpredictable in rhythm, spontaneous in how your life unfolds. This combination is incredibly rare, and it's exactly what creates the sense that someone is both safe and exciting at the same time, which, according to relationship psychologists, is one of the most powerful combinations for sustained long-term attraction. Most people think safety and excitement are opposites, that you have to choose one or the other. But the truth is, the deepest kind of craving comes from a person who offers both simultaneously: stability in who they are, unpredictability in how life with them unfolds. Now let's talk about boundaries, because this is where a lot of people quietly sabotage themselves without realizing it. Boundaries are not walls. They are not punishments. They're not a strategy to make someone chase you. Boundaries are simply the clearest expression of self-respect a person can offer. When you have boundaries, when you're willing to walk away from disrespect, when you don't rearrange your entire schedule for someone who hasn't shown consistent effort, when you're willing to say, "This isn't okay with me," you're communicating something profound on a subconscious level, that you value yourself enough to protect your peace. And people, whether they consciously realize it or not, are drawn to those who value themselves. It signals stability. It signals that if they're lucky enough to be let into your life, it means something, because you don't let just anyone in. Contrast that with a person who has no boundaries, who tolerates being canceled on repeatedly, who explains away inconsistency, who convinces themselves that low effort is just how that person shows love. That kind of tolerance doesn't create loyalty. It creates comfort, and comfort, when it isn't paired with respect, quickly turns into complacency. The moment someone realizes they can treat you poorly, and you'll stay anyway, something in the psychological dynamic shifts permanently. The craving disappears, replaced by a quiet, unspoken assumption. This person isn't going anywhere, so there's no urgency to treat them well. This is one of the most painful truths in relationship psychology, but it's also one of the most freeing once you understand it, because it means the way to be craved isn't to try harder, it's to require more. Let's shift for a moment and talk about presence, because this might be the most underrated psychological tool of all. Presence means being fully in the moment with someone, not distracted, not performing, not mentally rehearsing what you'll say next, not checking your phone every few minutes, but genuinely fully there. In a world where almost everyone is half present almost all the time, full presence has become rare. And rarity, as we've already discussed, creates value. When you give someone your undivided attention, real eye contact, real listening, real curiosity about their inner world, it creates an intensity that most people have never experienced before, because most people have never actually had someone listen to them that completely. This isn't about performing intense eye contact as a technique. It's about genuinely being curious about another human being, treating their thoughts and stories as worth your full attention. That kind of presence is intoxicating, not because it's rare as a gimmick, but because it makes the other person feel deeply seen. And being deeply seen is one of the most powerful human needs there is. Here's something else worth sitting with. The people who create the strongest emotional pull are rarely the ones who talk the most about themselves. They're the ones who ask questions and actually listen to the answers. Human beings are, at their core, endlessly interested in themselves, their own stories, their own feelings, their own experiences. When you become a person who draws those stories out of someone, who makes them feel interesting, understood, and valued, you become associated in their mind with the feeling of being truly known. And that feeling, being truly known, is addictive in the healthiest possible sense. It's not something people forget easily, and it's not something they find in just anyone. Let's also talk about emotional regulation, because this quietly underpins everything we've discussed. A person who can stay calm under pressure, who doesn't spiral into anxiety at the first sign of distance, who doesn't need constant reassurance to feel secure, radiates a kind of stability that other people are naturally drawn toward. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't care. It means processing your emotions internally or with trusted friends, rather than making every fear or insecurity the other person's responsibility to manage. When you can sit with uncertainty without panicking, without demanding immediate clarity, without needing constant proof of where you stand, you become someone who feels safe to be close to. Because closeness with an emotionally reactive person is exhausting, while closeness with an emotionally grounded person feels like relief. Now, let's bring this all together, because these pieces aren't separate strategies. They're interconnected parts of a single psychological identity. Someone who builds a full, purposeful life outside of any one relationship. Someone who reveals themselves slowly, allowing curiosity to build naturally instead of oversharing everything at once. Someone who maintains boundaries rooted in self-respect rather than manipulation. Someone who offers full presence and real curiosity instead of surface-level attention. Someone who stays emotionally consistent in character while remaining unpredictable in rhythm and routine. When all of these things exist together in one person, something happens that can't be manufactured through tricks or scripts or games. A genuine, magnetic pull that other people feel but often can't fully explain. They just know they think about this person more than they expected to. They just know that conversations with this person feel different, that time spent with them feels valuable in a way that's hard to put into words. That is what real craving looks like. Not desperation, not obsession, but a quiet, persistent pull rooted in respect, curiosity, and the sense that this person is not easily replaced. I want to leave you with one final thought, because I think it's the most important thing in this entire video. None of this works if it's built on pretending. You cannot fake wholeness. You cannot fake self-respect for very long before it cracks under pressure. The goal was never to learn tricks to manipulate someone else's feelings. The goal is to become someone so genuinely secure, so genuinely full of purpose, so genuinely respectful of yourself, that magnetism becomes a natural byproduct of who you are, rather than a performance you have to maintain. That's the real secret nobody wants to say out loud, because it's harder than a quick trick. It requires actually building your life, your confidence, your boundaries, your presence. But it's also the only version of this that actually lasts, the only version that doesn't collapse the moment the performance stops. So here's my question for you, and I really want to know your honest answer in the comments below. Out of everything we talked about today, the mystery, the boundaries, the presence, the emotional consistency, which one do you personally struggle with the most? Is it walking away from something that doesn't respect you? Is it staying calm when you're uncertain about where you stand? Is it building a life so full that you don't need someone else to complete it? Whatever it is, be honest with yourself and tell me down below, because naming it is always the first step to actually changing it.